Hello and welcome to a new vlog and trip report, and this is going to be a very special trip report. We're traveling on a very beautiful railway line. We're going from Germany to Austria, we're going from Munich to Villach, and here on the map you can see our route. We're taking a closer look at the route in the animation. We're starting at the main station of Munich with a stop at the eastern station of Munich before heading on to Rosenheim on the Munich-Rosenheim Railway. After Rosenheim, we're then continuing on the Rosenheim-Salzburg Railway, on which we will have stops at Prien am Chiemsee, Traunstein and Freilassing, and then we are reaching Salzburg in Austria, crossing the border. We will not take a very close look at these first two railway lines in Germany, as there will be a separate video about them later on. So we continue in Salzburg with the Salzburg-Tirol Railway, on which we have stops in Golling-Abtenau, Bischofshofen, St. Johann im Pongau and Schwarzach-St. Veit. And in Schwarzach-St. Veit we are then reaching the Tauern Railway, which is the most spectacular part of this journey. On this railway line we have stops in Bad Gastein, Malnitz, Obervillach, and then we are reaching Spital Millstätter See, which is already on the so-called Drava Valley Railway, on the river Drava, or in German Drau, which will then bring us finally to our final destination, which is Villach main station. We're reaching Villach after around 332 kilometers or 4.5 hours. We're not starting at the main station in Munich. I had a long layover there, and as the Munich main station is under construction, I took an underground to Sendlinger Tor, and there's the bakery Müller, which is much nicer than the bakeries in the main station. Due to the constructions, there are no nice bakeries where you can sit down and spend some time. So if you have a long layover, which I would recommend if you're traveling with a very special train that only runs a few times a day or sometimes even only once a day, better arrive a bit earlier and have a nice cup of coffee, for example in the bakery, before then heading back to the main station. And here we can now take a look at the arrival of my Railjet that will bring me to Villach today. Now we can take a look at the interior of the Railjet, but there was some confusion in the beginning because the carriage with my reserved seat was actually the restaurant carriage and my seat number was not even there. So I was a bit confused because, as far as I knew, the Railjet is always the same. So I was asking a conductor who was also confused at first, and then he said, oh no, apparently today we have the Italy Railjet. So it seems like there is a Railjet that goes to Italy which has one car less. It's missing a first class car. So here we can see the other first class car, on which luckily there was a seat available. Here we can see the business class, which comes with even nicer seats, but I'm traveling in first class today. And the interior of the Railjet, which is the high-speed train of the Austrian railway ÖBB, is very comparable to the first class in the ICE3. The Railjet has the same seats, so the seats also come with the same ups and downs. They have quite good features, they're comfortable, they're movable, adjustable, with reading lights, power sockets, but the downside is that the table is rather small and not adjustable. Here we are leaving Munich main station, heading for our first stop, which will be just after a couple of minutes in Munich East, the second most important station in Munich. And now we're on the Munich-Rosenheim Railway. Here we can see one of the new Railjets. Maybe you know that there are new Railjets, the second generation of the Railjet. Unfortunately, my train today was the first generation, the old Railjet, which we have already seen in some videos. But still, it's always nice to travel with the Railjet, and for sure there will be a video about the new Railjet at some point in the future. But today there was no possibility to choose which train I want to take, because this train is running quite rarely, as it is going from Munich to Vienna via Villach, which is a quite big detour. In the meantime, we have stopped in Rosenheim, and now we're on the Rosenheim-Salzburg Railway. Here we are approaching the station of Prien am Chiemsee. Here we can also see the station of the Chiemsee Railway, unfortunately without a train at the moment. Here we can see a double traction of Railjet as an oncoming train. And what we're gonna also see now are the mountains. We can see the Alps finally. I always love the moment when you can see the Alps for the first time, when you're going in the direction of the Alps. No matter if you're taking a car or a train, it's always very beautiful if you see the mountains for the first time. But of course we're gonna see them much better in this video. And as I also said in the beginning, we will not take a very close look at this first part of the journey, as there will be a separate video about the journey between Salzburg and Munich later on. In the meantime, we are reaching Freilassing, which is the last station in Germany. If you're coming from Austria heading into Germany, there will be border controls here, but if you're going into Austria, there are almost no controls at all. So this time there were also no controls. Here we are crossing the river Villach, which is the border. In the middle of this bridge we have crossed the border into Austria, and now we are in Salzburg, crossing the river Salzach for the first time. We will see that river a few more times, and then we are reaching the very modern station of Salzburg Hauptbahnhof Salzburg main station. After leaving the main station of Salzburg, we're now on the Salzburg-Tyrol Railway, which is running from Salzburg to Wörgl, but we are only staying on this railway line until Schwarzach-St. Veit. Our first stop on this railway line is Golling-Abtenau, which is a quite interesting station, as it is located in Golling, and the second name, Abtenau, is a city which is around 20 minutes by car away from the station. After leaving Golling-Abtenau, we're crossing the Salzach again, and then we're heading into a tunnel, the Ofenau tunnel, and then we are reaching the Salzach-Klamm, the Salzach Gorge, which is a very beautiful part of our journey today. As you can see, we have a beautiful landscape. Now we're crossing the Salzach again directly after the tunnel, and now we're in a very beautiful landscape in a very narrow gorge. We are going under the Autobahn, which is also going through this gorge, and now we can finally see the beautiful mountains. We're going directly parallel with the Salzach, which is on the right side. We're also going past the castle Hohenwerfen, which we can see here. We can see the huge mountains of the Alps on both sides, especially on the left side. We're then reaching our next stop, which is Bischofshofen. Get there, we're crossing the Salzach once again. We already saw a second railway line in the background. Here we are meeting this railway line. This is the Enns Valley Railway coming from Selztal, also a very interesting, beautiful railway, hopefully part of a video in the future as well. Then we're approaching Bischofshofen, where you also of course have a connection to the Enns Valley Railway, and then we're heading on to our next stop, which is then St. Johann im Pongau. Leaving the station here, and just a few minutes later we are approaching Schwarzach-St. Veit. To get there, we're crossing the Salzach once again, this time for the last time, as we're leaving the valley of the river Salzach. Here we are slowly approaching the bridge. Unfortunately, we cannot see the bridge in the video as there was an ICE obstructing the view. And here we are now approaching Schwarzach-St. Veit, the last station on the Salzburg-Tyrol Railway, and that means that we are now continuing on the most spectacular railway line of this journey, the Tauern Railway. Directly in the beginning, there is a new passage, as the Tauern Railway was renewed and rebuilt in some parts. There were some new passages, bridges and tunnels. Then we're approaching two tunnels, the Lower Klamm Tunnel and the Upper Klamm Tunnel. And between them there's a very short section which is on a bridge, and we're crossing the river Gasteiner Ache for the first time. These two tunnels are also single track. Most parts of this railway line are double track, but here it's a single track railway for a few kilometers. Here we can see the short part between the two tunnels, and then we're leaving the tunnel, and it is a double track railway line again. We're then crossing the Gasteiner Ache several times. We're going through two stations, Dorfgastein and Bad Hofgastein, without stopping. In the beginning, we're down in the valley of the Gasteiner Ache. It's not too spectacular. We have these noise protection walls, which is very typical for Austria. But here you can now clearly see that the railway line is already gaining some altitude, and now we're gonna have the most beautiful part of this railway line, because we are now above the valley and we have some very beautiful views. We're also going under a ski lift. cable car, the Schlossalm cable car, which we can see here. So we're now above the city of Bad Hofgastein. We're still gaining some altitude, getting higher and higher, so we're also getting more and more beautiful views of the valley below. Probably one of the most spectacular parts is the crossing of the Angerschlucht, the Anger Gorge. As there are two bridges, we're going over a new bridge, and directly next to us we can see the old bridge. Here we can see the old bridge, the Angerschlucht Brücke, Anger Gorge Bridge, the old and the new one. And then a few minutes later we're also approaching the station of Bad Gastein. Before that we have some more fantastic views. As you can see, still high above the valley as we are on the northern ramp leading towards the most spectacular building of this railway line, the Tauern Tunnel. Bad Gastein is then on the same level as the railway line, it's also above the valley, so here we are approaching the station Bad Gastein, and then we're continuing on, gaining some more altitude until we are reaching Böckstein, and there we are then heading into the Tauern Tunnel. The Tauern Tunnel is 8,370 meters long. The highest point of the tunnel is at 1,226 meters above sea level. That's also the highest point of the railway line. And what's also quite interesting about this tunnel is that there is no road connection between the two valleys that the tunnel is connecting. So there is no street between one side and the other side of the tunnel, and therefore there's the so-called Autoschleuse, which is a car shuttle train, as that is the only option to connect those two valleys without having to drive for several hours. And now we're going into the tunnel, which was built from 1901 to 1909. After leaving the tunnel on the other side, we can see one of the trains of the Autoschleuse trains. In the first two carriages, the drivers is seating, whilst in the rear carriages, the cars are transported. After the tunnel, we are approaching the station of Malnitz-Obervillach, which is also our next stop. And now we're on the southern ramp, so we're losing altitude going back down. And also this part of the railway line is very spectacular as it has been completely rebuilt. First new part are the Kaponing Tunnel and the Ochening Tunnel. Between those two tunnels there's also a very short section on a bridge, and on this section we're crossing the former railway line, which has a lot more tunnels, bridges and curves, so it took longer to use this railway line, so it was rebuilt. Now it's in an almost straight line, so it means also it's much steeper, but it's also faster. And what's quite interesting about this part is that we can almost completely see the former railway line. There are many old tunnels that can be seen, there are a lot of old bridges that can be seen, so whenever there's no bridge you can take a look for a tunnel. You will see a lot of old tunnel entrances in the next minutes, and whenever we are on a bridge you can almost always see the old bridge somewhere hidden in the background. So if you take a very close look when we're on the bridge, you can see an old bridge somewhere in the background, and that's the old railway line. So also this is a very beautiful part of the journey. We're now slowly coming to an end of this very beautiful part of the railway line. We have some more bridges, some more tunnels that we can see of the old railway line. And shortly before the station of Kolbnitz, at which we are not stopping, we're going over a former funicular, which unfortunately has been closed down. There are also not many remains of this funicular. It used to be the Reiseck funicular. And now, as you can see, the landscape is much less spectacular. We are now down in the Möll Valley and we're reaching the Drava Valley Railway. On this railway we have a stop at Spital Millstätter See. In Austria and in German it's also called Drau, so we're stopping at Spital an der Drau, which is close to the Millstätter See, which is a lake, the Lake Millstatt. And as I said, the landscape is not as spectacular as it used to be on the Tauern Railway. I mean, it's still very, very beautiful, but compared to the Tauern Railway, it's not as spectacular. We still have beautiful mountains in the background, it's a very nice and green valley, but still, the Tauern Railway is probably the most beautiful part of the journey. We're now approaching the station of Villach, Villach Hauptbahnhof, Villach main station, where I'm leaving the train, then continuing on to Vienna, where we will continue with a different train. But first we have another quite long layover, longer waiting time, so I'm heading into the city, and that means that a very beautiful train journey of around 4.5 hours is now coming to an end. 2.5 of those 4.5 hours are in Austria, and that's the more beautiful part. For my layover, I visited the brewery of Villach, enjoyed a freshly brewed beer with a nice schnitzel, with very nice temperatures of around 30 degrees, much less actually in this moment than in Germany, so it was a very nice lunch. In the next video we will continue on 2 spectacular railway lines with a very interesting train, so make sure to stay tuned. Here you can see when this video will be uploaded and the name of the song. As always, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to comment, like, subscribe or share the video link, and I hope to see you in my next video then.